I want to kick it off with what I think is the theme of the NADA dealer convention every year. And I'm a huge proponent of NADA. I'm the guest instructor at the Dealer Academy. I am a huge fan of everything they do for our industry. And the convention is one of the it is the Super Bowl of automotive every year. And I'm unbelievably honored to have gotten to do a workshop this year. And I'm going to do this like I did the workshop. Only difference is I can talk to you like in real terms about what we've been doing specifically at AutoFi related to what I think is happening in the marketplace. And I think the one thing I saw at the convention this year that was really similar to all the conventions I had been to before is that everywhere you went, effectively everyone was making predictions, right? Like everywhere you went, it was like, oh, this is the next thing. Like, oh, let's do, oh yeah, it's AI. Like everyone is constantly making predictions about where this business is going. And for me, what I think is wild is if there's one thing that we human beings are actually really bad at, it's making predictions. And there's this massive amount of data that shows us that human beings, when it comes down to it, just aren't good at predicting things. And there's so many examples out there of like real examples of like, this is the next thing. And it couldn't be more wrong. And so for me, from choosing from all those examples, I picked the one that speaks to me the most. And it's an example of the pundits being wrong about predictions, because what you end up with is people show up to NADA and you have this like idea that this is the next thing. And my favorite example of us being bad at predictions comes from 1997. And at the end of the like grunge alternative music era, there was one thing that Kurt Loder from MTV News and the New York Times could agree on. And that's that it was very clear what the next genre of alternative music was going to be, like what the next thing that was going to take over the alternative rock charts was. And I'll ask if you want to put it in the chat, if anybody wants to guess what like the next music was in 1997. 1997, grunge is coming to an end, right? Like Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana and all that's kind of ending, and everyone's like, what's next? And everybody gets on and starts like saying, we know what's coming next. Anybody want to guess what all the pundits were predicting is the next music in 1997? I'll look over here, see if anybody puts it in the chat. Any guesses? Any guesses in the chat? I don't see anybody guessing, which is fine. Rap, Carrie Wise. That was disco country. I like it. Some good guesses. I'm talking end of polka. Yes, new country. I don't even know what new country is, but I hate it. Josh Anish with EDM. Stuart. Okay, you guys are getting close. Okay, in 1997, as the whole world of grunge music was coming to an end, everybody was saying that this was the next music. You ready? Yes, Sandy, it was techno. Like literally on like the New York Times has an article and Kurt Loder being like, techno is the next music that's going to take over the entire country, and every one of these American kids are going to be listening to techno. And what's wild is that they like had these data points to support their like point of view, right? They had a #1 hit from a techno band called Prodigy from the UK with Firestarter that like rocketed to the like top of the charts. They had movies come out like Hackers with these like cool kids with like cool haircuts, and Angelina Jolie with like the like cartilage piercing. They're like working on computers and they're like hacking, and they've got like the split computer and they're listening to techno. And they had like all of these data points that said this is what was coming next. And outside of Prodigy, that one song that nobody knows the name of that goes and the Mortal Kombat theme, can you name one techno song from the 90s that you still remember? Can you name one hit from techno from the 90s? And nobody's gonna like put one in here because there wasn't one, because techno never really took off. And so my question for you is, does anybody know what genre actually had a moment and took off in the alternative rock world in 1998 as grunge came to an end? Anybody want to guess? Because it could not be further from techno. And we gave a hint at the beginning of this webinar. It was actually swing music. In 1998, the surprise genre that proved all the pundits wrong was like silly looking dudes in ugly suits playing trumpets. And what's wild is all five of these bands had like chart topping hits in 1998. In fact, the one down here in the corner, right where I'm at, this is Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. They played the Super Bowl halftime show in 1999. Like literally, all of these bands had these massive hits. And they couldn't be further off from what the pundits were saying. And what's wild is when you think about this, is over and over again, we see these predictions come out about like, this is what's next, like this is what's coming. And over again, what we find out is that the pundits are wrong. And what's so crazy to me is these pundits, they get on stage and like, and if you think about it, it's not a new phenomenon, right? Like I remember back when I was in retail a decade ago, it was the same phenomenon of here's what's next, here's what's coming. And when you look at the research, that's been what we've been doing as long as pundits have been around. And what's wild is I think that sometimes these pundits get on stage and they like jump around with a bunch of bombacity about here's what's coming next and this is it and they know. And I tell you this because I'm one of those pundits and I've gotten it wrong. And I've gotten it wrong over and over again. And I think that what I mean by that is I think a lot of times it's easy to think this is where it's going. But if you look at all the signs, that may not be exactly where it's going. And it may be a good directive of where things are actually happening. And so what I don't think that we should do in our industry, and we have a tendency to do this, is we see a prediction that's not right. And we go, oh, okay, well, that doesn't work. And we kind of toss it to the side and we go back to what we've always done. And I think there's a real risk there because it's not that technology doesn't change things. I think that technology in the future actually magnificently changes things. In fact, I can prove to you how wrong I've been. Because anybody here, NADA Dealer Academy student? I see no hands because I can't see any of you. If you've gone through NADA Dealer Academy, you've seen me give this quiz. Yeah, what up, Wes Kreider in 399? I was class 82. We got some other students out here. You can throw your class number in there. When I go through the academy and I'm the guest instructor on digital retail, every one of you has seen this quiz. The quiz is what percentage of customers start their car buying journey online. It's 92% of customers. They spend on average 14 hours doing research. They still come to the dealership and it takes 187 minutes or over 3 hours for us to sell them a car. And now instead of going to 5 dealerships before they buy, they actually end up going to less than 1 to 2. So it's 1.2 to 2.3. And if you look at all this data, I show this to every single class at NADA Dealer Academy. And you know what nobody calls me out on? I'm going to hide. I'm going to hide down here. Nobody calls me out on, anybody see what date that is? What date that data comes? Oh, I'm hiding it. I'm going to get lower. I'm going to get lower, lower, lower. Anybody see what that date is of where this data comes from? Anybody type it into the chat? Yes. Wes, it's 2018. And so if digital retail was the solution to the problem of a 3-hour car deal, right? I can't get my finger, of a 3-hour car deal. And according to NADA, 85% of dealers now have a digital retail tool on their website. Would you expect the updated data to show that we have significantly decreased the amount of time that a customer spends in a dealership? If digital retail actually solved the problem of speeding up the process and improving things on the showroom and really like decreasing the amount of time that it takes to work a car deal, should we see that 187 minutes that it takes to work a car deal dramatically improve? And the answer is absolutely. Well, 85% of dealers, according to NADA, have a digital retailing tool on their website. My question is, would you like to see the new data updated for last year? Well, let's see how big the improvement is. Are you ready? It's the same. Like, bro, like it still takes 3 hours to work a car deal. So the average since 2018 to last year has not improved dramatically. It's still, even with 85% of dealers having some form of digital retail on their website, it still hasn't improved the outcomes of actually speeding up the process. And I think we run the risk that I mentioned earlier. We run the risk of going, oh, okay, well, digital retail doesn't really matter. Let's throw it to the side. It's still 3 hours. It's not solving the problem. And I think that's incorrect because I think that technology does matter. Technology is constantly impacting our lives in ways that I don't think we fully realize. I'll show you my favorite example. This is TV today, right? Like Do you guys remember how horrible TV used to be? Like, do you remember what TV was? You would literally get a newspaper and you would like open up the newspaper. I got a newspaper as a prop for this. You would open up the newspaper, you would go to the back, you would like find the like TV guide section, you'd get out your slide rule and your like pencil and you would highlight, okay, Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, that's when Breaking Bad is on. And you would organize your life around TV. That's not what we do anymore. We now organize TV around our life. We decide, okay, I'm going to just wait till 8:30 when the kids are in bed, and then I'm going to hit a button, and the next episode of The Witcher is going to start playing. Like, that's the way that TV works. But what most people don't realize is this wasn't the starting place for Netflix. Anybody know how Netflix got their start? You can put it in the chat. I got the chat open so I can see it. Anybody know where Netflix got their start? How did Netflix get started? I'll wait till somebody put it in the chat. Yes, yes, mailing videos. They were literally mailing DVDs around the country. And what's wild to me is I think that like digital retail is our DVD mailing moment. It's not the total and like outright solution to the 3-hour car deal, but it is a massive step in the right direction. And what I caution you as a dealer is to not like throw the baby out with the bathwater and go, okay, well, it still takes 3 hours to work a card. I don't know that this digital retail thing is working. That digital retail thing is a step for us in the right direction. Now, I didn't have to mail DVDs to figure this out. What I did was loaded my pregnant wife and 5 of our kids, we have 6 now, into our Sprinter van, and we drove around the country, and I worked car deals at tons of different dealerships for weeks at a time to try and understand what's the real problem facing retail today and what can we immediately do to start solving some of those problems. And I think that there was 3 real problems that stuck out to me. The problems were surprising and that they weren't surprising. Here's the 3 problems. Problem number 1. Bro, sales managers are smoked. Like, sales manager exhaustion is at an all-time high. It's harder to be a sales manager today than it was when I was a sales manager in the mid-2000s. Like, sales managers are absolutely smoked. Secondly, 3 hours is way too long to take a car deal. Like, it just takes way too long to work a car deal. And frankly, the way that we're working car deals and the way that we're doing things is reinforcing this massive customer trust gap. So my first foray into selling cars over the last year was I went to an auto group out in California. I'm good friends with the CEO and owner, and I said, "Hey, I want to show up and sell cars. Like, get me some, golf shirts and a new employee packet." And I'm just gonna go start taking ups. And I want everybody there to think I shaved the beard, I went in with a mustache, and I just started selling cars. And I had this idea in my head somewhere that like today's customer was somehow going to be so much nicer to me and like treat me differently with some level of respect. And bro, like the first person I upped literally looked at me like I just gotten out of prison. Now, granted, I kind of look like I just got out of prison, but I was shocked at how much customers, even today, still treat salespeople like dirt. And I know because I was a salesperson and they were treating me like dirt. And so I want to talk about what's actually creating these problems and what we can immediately start doing as dealers to really alleviate those problems. So let's start with sales manager exhaustion. This is sales manager face. Like that right up there is sales manager face. Like, do you see it? Some of you are probably making it right now. Like they're just like, oh, and you see it happen all the time at dealerships is like that face. And I started doing some research to figure out like why is it like so brain damaging to be a sales manager? And in that research, what I found is that it's actually related to the way our brains operate. Like it's literally related to the way that our brains function. And so if you think about how a brain is set up, you have this inner part that I'm blocking called the limbic system. That's where you feel feelings. That's where your emotions are. That's where we like make connections with other people. And then you have this outside part called the neocortex, which is your like most recently developed brain. It's the part of you that really sets apart humans in the way that we think. It's where we do context analysis. We do like complicated logic decisioning. It's where we do math. It's where we do like the heavy lifting of thinking. So the inside part of our brain, the limbic system, that's where like we feel feelings. The outside part of the brain is where we do like math and facts. And so people that are, well, I'll ask you all this. Who do you typically promote to a sales manager? Is it your best salespeople or your worst salespeople? You guys can all type in the chat. It's your best. And who makes your best salespeople? Is it typically the like detail-oriented, analytical-minded person? Or is it the person that's like good at making friends and talking people into stuff? It's the second one. So what we do is we take these people that have highly developed limbic systems that are really good at like emotional connection and jokes and timing. And then we put them in a job that literally becomes heavy duty decision making all day, constant analysis, and math. So we take somebody with this like highly developed sales personality part of their brain and we put them in a math job. And the crazy thing about our neocortex is that our neocortex is also the place where we feel discomfort. And so I'm going to prove it to you. When you use your neocortex, it makes you uncomfortable. And so what I want to show you here is a simple example of how we can highlight that. Everybody, I want you to get a pen and a sheet of paper. You should have like your notebook and your pens with you. Get your pen and paper out. And we're going to do a quick test where we're going to use your neocortex. And then we're going to have you see how it makes you feel. Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. All I want you to do is solve this simple 8th grade math problem. All I need you to do with a pen and paper, no calculator, is solve this simple 8th grade math problem. That's it. Everybody go. I can't hear you all, but in every room I've ever done this in, everyone goes, oh, right? Everyone's, oh no, like literally I can hear the like, sound. And so here's my next question, and you can like show it by like putting a plus or a one or whatever in the chat. Who here, right, would rather have, you're like, we have, I guess, another 40 minutes of me being able to talk to y'all. Who here would rather in that time prick their finger and have blood drawn and be able to play around on your phone? Or you can do nothing but 8th grade math, like long division, multiplication, basic geometry and algebra, the FOIL method. So we can either do math problems for the rest of this by hand, or you can like draw blood and then play around on your cell phone for the next 30 minutes. Show of hands, which I can't see, who here's getting their blood drawn? What's wild is in every room I've done this, 80 to 90% of the room raises their hands. And the reason being is that using our brains like this hurts. It makes us uncomfortable. And it actually leads to a real phenomenon that is backed up by science, right, Zach? Amen. Jess McClellan, take the blood, 100%, right? Like this right here is why we have this scientific phenomenon that's facing sales managers. And it's literally called decision fatigue. What is decision fatigue? It is the mental strain that comes from making too many choices day to day, which reduces performance and efficiency. And what it looks like if you graph it out is the more decisions you make, the worse you get at the decisions and the more they make you unhappy. And there's so much good science out here. Here's my pro tip for this. If you are ever a defendant in a court case, be first on the docket, not last on the docket, because if you're first on the docket, the judges are way more favorable to the defendants. As the day goes on, as they get tireder and tireder, and they make more decisions, they become way less favorable to the defendant. And I'll ask y'all, you ever work a car deal at 8:30 at night, you know what that looks like, right? Your sales manager's like, what do you got? You're like, I got a car deal. Like, I'm working a deal. Well, what do you got? It's 8:30. Like, well, let's go. Like, you get a new manager at 8:30 that's wildly different than the manager you got at, say, 10 o'clock in the morning. And it's because of this right here. It's literally because they're going through this process of decision fatigue. And what's wild with that decision fatigue is you don't really realize it's happening. But when I describe it, you'll be like, oh, that's what it looks like. You're a sales manager. I'm going to make all of you pretend to be a sales manager right now. You're sitting at the desk. We're going to do an activity, and you're going to feel this decision fatigue happen. We're sitting at the desk, right? And you've got like a dealer trade phone call you just get off of. You hang up from that one. You hop over. You got a salesperson standing in front of you like, hey, you remember that Tacoma you bid a month ago? They want to know, will you do 26 on it? And like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And then you have another salesperson up that's working a car deal. And this is what that salesperson's got. They got a 2021 Elantra that they're selling to the customer. It's got 17,000 clicks on it. The customer's got $1,200 worth of trade equity on it. They've got a 689 FICO, so they got pretty good credit. It's a TransUnion score. They're putting $1,000 down. They got 118% LTV because you're still making money on that deal. And they got an awesome job. So their payment to income is 4%. Here's my question for you. I want you to be a sales manager right now. You're in the middle of working all this stuff. Now you got this deal. Here's the decision you have to make. You ready? Which of these lenders are you going to send it to? And I'll scoot out of the way. This other way right here. And I want you to pick your top three, and I want you to put it in the chat. Pick the three lenders that you think would be the best to send this customer to. Go now. Let's see what we get. I'll give an award out for the winner. I don't have any awards in here, but I will make one up. I'll send an AutoFi hat. All right, this is your customer. I want to see what three lenders you're going to send it to. Put it in the chat. I'm waiting. All right, I got Wells, Cap One, Chase. I got USB, HNB, Wells. I got Cap One, Chase, Ally, Cap One, Chase, Wells, Chase, US Bank, Cap One. Only have TD in Canada, TD, Ally, Wells, Chase, Wells, Ally, Ally, US Bank, Cap One. All right, you guys ready? So here's what's wild. If we were to shotgun this customer to all 15 of these lenders, we would get a first place callback, a second place callback. We would go all the way from best callback to worst callback, which means if we ranked these lenders out from top to bottom, there would be a first place lender, a second place lender, and a third place lender. And here's what y'all in the chat just proved to me. Every one of you, every time you look at a deal like this goes, well, okay, Chase, Ally, maybe TD. They brought me some golf balls the other day. We literally have this happen all day, every day. And what's wild is when you look at the data, that's what every manager in America is doing. You know how I know is you can look at the data of 3 managers on the same desk, and you can look at the buckets of their like customers, and you can see that this manager would submit that customer to these 3 lenders, this manager would submit that customer to these 3 lenders, and this manager would submit that customer to these 3 lenders. And what's crazy is we even sometimes get it so glaringly wrong. Wells Fargo, right? They cut back to 110% is all they would approve to. And we looked at a group of managers that were sending them 117. Every customer was going to Wells Fargo if they were financing at least $40,000, even though Wells was declining all of them. And what you end up with is this like idea that this is something we're really great at. And then we use all this brain power to do it over and over again. And then it creates these like unintentional like ripples that go throughout your dealership. And I'll show you what I mean. One of my favorite examples, there's a Ford dealership down in Richmond, Virginia. They have this awesome sales manager. His name is Jazz Singh, and the guy is unbelievably sharp. Jazz is like the general on the desk. And then there's 3 other sales managers that were all selling cars themselves in the last like 3 to 6 months. So anytime a deal like this comes up where there's not a really clear answer, guess what those managers do? Hey, Jazz, come take a look at this one. Hey, Jazz, will you come look at this customer? Who do you think I should send it to? And you know what it leads to? The increasing, oh, by the way, this is the right 3. And what's even crazier is that like a few months ago, this would have been the right 3 because also their programs are constantly changing. And if you are always sending to this one lender as a creature of habit, as Ally Quinta calls it, then what you're doing is you're missing out on car deals. And what's crazy is what happens is usually one person becomes the expert here, and then everyone else is asking that expert for their opinion, which then leads to this intense bottleneck that happens at the desk. And so what you end up with is this system that then gets completely congested when it all slams into the desk. And the question I like to ask when I'm in a room full of people is, let me ask you this. Do car deals happen one at a time, or do they come in waves? And the answer is they come in waves. You got nothing going, and then at 4 o'clock, I'm working 5 car deals, and there's 2 of us on the desk. And now, like, I go out to bid a car, and the only person here is that person right there. And now they got a line of 4 salespeople in front of them. And if you're the last person in that line, how long does it take you to get that first pencil? 15, 20 minutes? Okay, well, that's too long, because in that 15, 20 minutes, what's happening to your customer is they're sitting out there, and their buying temperature, which is the highest when they get back from the test drive, is now crashing into the ground. I heard somebody say this to me after class the other day. A dealer came up and said, you know what? He's like, I now get it. We let their buying temperature go so low that the only way we can convince them to buy a car is by giving up gross. Like literally, and I think the word he used was, we let their buying temperature drop so low that the only way to make the car deal is by giving the house away. And that's the truth that you see in this business. And so it takes us forever to get these numbers out there. We got a customer that already doesn't trust us. They're waiting 15 to 20 minutes. And as they do, their body language is changing to look like this. And then we send a salesperson out with the most important information to give to that customer to really boost the like level of trust to help us close the car deal. And we send out that most important information in a format that we think looks like this, right? Like this is what we imagine it looks like. To the customer, it looks like this. And we reinforce this by making our paperwork look like this. Like this is literally what we're using to present the most important, most valuable information to that customer. And bro, and I get it. This is how I did it, except I would have used green Sharpie because, well, I like to use green Sharpie and I draw a smiley face and write thank you next to it. Like, think about that for a moment. We got a customer at our dealership back from a test drive. We make them wait 15 minutes, and then we put this in front of them, and we wonder why they don't trust our salespeople. Well, because we keep building systems and processes that reinforce all the negative ideas they have about who we are and what we're trying to do. And so what I want to get to now is, what are some real solutions, right? Like, what are some ways that we can actually solve this? And I'll take the first one on decision making. The way you solve this is you automate for optimization. And there's a bunch of you on this call that are probably going, oh, great, here's the tech guy lingo. And I get it. Like, I would be like mad at these words too, because they sound like, oh, here comes the AI pitch. You don't need AI to automate for optimization. What does it mean? It means get the best outcome without having to think about it and choose. That's literally what it means. And there's all these great examples of how that's done without any sort of technology interface. My favorite is Steve Jobs, who's a technologist. Steve Jobs knew that the best he ever looked was in a black Issey Miyake turtleneck, pair of Levi's 501 jeans, and some New Balance 990s. And so that's all he bought. And so he automated his closet for optimization. So no matter what he did, he grabbed an outfit that was on brand and he felt good in it. And you see other people do this. This isn't a new concept, right? Mark Zuckerberg does it. Einstein did it. Like, all of these great thinkers realized that if I could use less of my brain to make simple decisions like this, I could use more of my brain for the important ones. And that's what's wild, is about 80% of your car deals are right down the middle, and you've got 20% that are edge cases that you need a manager focused on. But by the time the manager's looking at that 20%, their brain's so cooked by trying to decide where to send that Elantra deal that they don't realize that they're making the wrong decisions. And so the other thing that I think is unique to our business is that we think of like technology as like as this like this thing that means I'm not good at my job. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I like to ask the room at the convention, okay, who here is a good driver and knows how to get where they're going? And everybody raises their hands. I say, okay, well, who here still plugs the address into something like this to make sure that when they drive, they don't get stuck in traffic? Well, does this make you think that you're not a good driver? No, what it does is make me realize, like, I can use something to help me do my job more effectively so I don't get stuck in traffic and have to wait and now my kids are late to school. And I think that's a mindset that as a dealer industry, it's imperative for us to really start adopting, is how can I leverage technology to actually support me being better at my job, more efficient and more effective at my job, and figuring out a way to do this that doesn't take as much effort, so I'm not completely trashed by the end of the day. And so at AutoFi, and this is a bunch of gobbledygook, but I want to use it to illustrate a point. At AutoFi, we built a solution that optimizes and automates lender routing for the outcomes that support the dealer. And we tested it against sales managers submitting their own car deal side by side. And what we found was wildly surprising. That if you even simplify and say, okay, we're going to get a group of managers together, and we're not going to use any of the million car deals that we could analyze. We're just simply going to get the managers at a dealership to agree that if it is a 689 to a 720 and the equity is 120% or up, it's going to go to these three lenders. If it's 100% to 120, it'll go to these three. And you just set some rules and you standardize that submission process. What you end up with is you send it to less lenders and you get more approvals. So when we tested this, what we found was the machine itself would send to less lenders and get more approvals. And what's wild about that is if you get an approval as submitted, 78% of those closed at the dealership. So if we could get a dealer an approval as submitted, 78% of those customers bought a car. And so what I think is interesting here, and if you're a skeptical car person like me, let's go through here. It's like, well, what about that one? Well, yeah, that one deal, you still got to work it. But the like 80%, you don't need to work those so hard. In fact, the 80%, the money gets made by getting it to the right lender with the right structure at the right time. Those 20% of deals that are like edgy, where you got to go get a cosigner, you got to figure some things out. Like that is where you need managers focused. And what's hard is managers can't distinguish between the two because they're just coming at them so quickly. And so what we've got to do is create solutions that alleviate that bottleneck at the desk. And one of those is automating 80% of the use cases of that lender routing. And what we're seeing with the dealers that are using our in-showroom experience that's automating that lender routing, the outcomes are exceptional. And we have dealers. I was talking to an owner of a Mitsubishi franchise in Minnesota that's doing 150 cars a month, that literally 80% of their car deals are going through the AutoFi routing process and funding at a bank that it's sent to, because it dramatically simplifies and improves the experience. Now, let's talk about the deal process. I was at NADA Dealer Academy on Tuesday, and one of the students was like, well, the reason it takes so long is because the customer wants to negotiate. And I was like, bullshit, bro. I get it. They want to negotiate. That's not what takes long. My example that I used was the first car deal I worked on a sheet of paper was on a customer buying like a 2019 CPO Mazda XC30. Is that the small one or the X30? I don't really know the cars, but it was the little Mazda SUV thing. And she was there with her mom. We got back from the test drive. We go inside. She wanted a used one. I go to the desk. I get the first pencil. I walk the 25 yards over to the desk. I get the first pencil. I come back. I sit down and I review the pencil with her. She goes, oh, well, what would it be if I put $5,000 down? And I go, that's a good question. Hang on a moment. I'll be right back. And I got up and I walked the 25 yards back over to the desk. The manager that started my car deal is now nowhere to be found. To the right of them, there's another manager sitting down. I go, hey, they want to know what it would be with $5,000 down. And they go, who? And I go, the Joneses. And he goes, who's the Joneses? I go, their name was like Courtney something. Yeah, Courtney Jones, right here. Can you look it up? Here's the stock number. And then he has to find the tab. He has to open it up. And then he has to like go through and build everything out. And then he prints it out with $5,000 down, gives it back to me. I walk the 25 yards back out there a few minutes later. I sit down with her and I go, okay, well, with $5,000 down, it's a 780 or 687 payment. She goes, okay, well, what would it be at 72 months? Good question. I'll be right back. And I get up and I walk 25 yards back to the desk and I interrupt somebody else again to get that little bit of information. And if you look at a car deal, it's not that the time it takes is coming from an intensive negotiation with the customer. The time it takes is coming from what is inherently an unintelligent deal process. And so I have a tech solution you can install right now at your dealerships today that is significantly better than that process I just described. And it's available to all of you. And it's this: just put one of these on your salespeople's desks, because faxing back and forth to your sales tower is faster than them getting up and walking across the dealership to ask a question like, well, what would it be with 72 months? Literally put a fax machine on your desk and it's a better solution, because right now, this is our tech stack. It's paper, it's a printer, and it's a Sharpie. And I think it is literally causing us to close less car deals, and it's forcing us to give away unnecessary gross to try and close those car deals, because it's reinforcing a bad perception with the customer. And so here's what it is, bro: put bumpers on the lanes and let your salespeople play around with anything that the customer can play around with on your website. They want to switch down payment. They want to look at a lease. Oh, and by the way, on that customer on the 19, when I got out there on the second one, her uncle showed up that had leased a Mazda 3 months ago, and it was third base in the deal. Go, whoa, well, why don't you look at a new one with a lease? That'll be a lower payment than this used one. And now I'm starting back over at square one. Cool. Put bumpers on the lanes and allow that customer and that salesperson to go, okay, 72 months, it would be this. Okay, what about $5,000? Oh, it would be this. And what's wild is when you do that, you start to make it the customer's idea and they take ownership of the car deal. And by letting them take ownership of the car deal and allowing them to be involved in the process and feeling like they're getting where they want to be, what you end up with is customers that are way more likely to say yes to it. And that's where I think that this technology can build a massive trust bridge with our customers. And I've seen that trust bridge in action at dealerships because, well, the data speaks for itself, right? Like, there's so many studies out there. My favorite is one from Penn State, that you are way more likely to give your credit card info to a computer than you are to a human being. Like, think about that for a moment. You're way more likely to give your credit card info to a computer than you are to a human being. And that's like across so many different variables and studies. In almost every situation, we're more likely to like swipe it ourselves and hit the little thing than we are to hand it to somebody to go do that. And that's what's wild to me is you don't trust your financial portfolio to these guys anymore. I know I sure don't. Right, like yeah, we're gonna like, work a deal. Like I don't trust. You know, I trust my finance. I trust it to these guys because there's transparency, and I feel like it's my money, and I can do with it what I want. And what's wild is you use technology to build trust in all of these things you do. Right. If you were at the convention, it may have been the same driver that got you from the hotel to the convention center, from the airport to the hotel, but you use the app because the digital interface made you feel more comfortable with what was happening than showing up and being like, all right, how much is it going to cost to take me to the Cosmo? Like literally, we use technology to build trust bridges in almost every industry in the world except ours. And what's wild is how powerful that technology is. I'll give you my favorite couple of examples. This kid has been in the business for 2 months. When I took this picture, I took this picture from over at the desk. This is at a Subaru store. These two customers right here are buying a Subaru. This is like their fifth Subaru. Aldo Iaquinta, that kid, 2 months in the business, terrified, looks like every other lost puppy at the desk. Everything about them is like, there's no way. That kid right there got this customer on the lot, lands them on the car, gets them their trade information brought in, goes on their test drive, comes back, everything's loaded up in AutoFi in front of them. They close on the payment, they flip over to the menu's up in front of the customer, and that kid right there that's been in the business for 2 months convinces the customer to buy a gold package, and that car deal made $7,000 front to back, and he's been in the business 2 months. That's the power of technology because the customer made their own decision, and that entire car deal took less than 22 minutes from the time the customer was logged in the system till they were e-contracting and driving away. Like that's what technology can do for your dealership to actually solve the problem of a 3-hour car deal. And here's what's wild to me, right, is that like this is one of my favorite examples of why technology closes customers. I had a customer, and this is one that you've all experienced before. This customer, the whole time we're out on our test drive, all he wants to talk about is like, well, I'm paying no more than 10%. Like literally, it's like, bro, we haven't even picked out a car yet. Yeah, but I know what you're gonna try and do. Like I paid 2.9 on my last one. I know rates are up, but I ain't paying no 10%. I was like, bro, let's find a car you love, and then we'll let the rates figure, like we'll figure all that out. And so we get back from this test drive, loves the car, putting $0 down, wanting to go 84 months. We're estimating it like 11%. He's like, I don't want to see no 10%. I said, listen, let's click continue in the AutoFi checkout. And what we use is the same technology that powers like Rocket Mortgage's online lending program for auto. And what it's going to do is submit you to the top 3 to 5 lenders for your credit profile on this specific vehicle. And then it's going to show you the best options that are available. And you just choose the one that works best for you. How does that sound? He goes, all right, great. Clicks continue, fills out the credit app. It takes like a minute, hit submit. And here's something that that in my entire career in retail, I never did. Typically what I would have done was I would have written it up because this was my best callback. Ally at 15.24 for 84 months with 0 down was my absolute best callback. Now 15.24 by the way has the max rate markup already applied to it. So what I typically would have done as a sales manager was I would have written up my worksheet at 15.24 because that's the best callback I got. And I would hand it to my salesperson, and my salesperson would freak out. And I would say things like, do I need to get a real salesperson to work this deal? And they go, oh, fine. And then they would go out to the customer, and then they get their face clawed off over the interest rate. And the customer would hit the ceiling. We're going to peel them off the ceiling, and it would be a bad deal. We submitted it through AutoFi, and this is what came up on the screen. 15.24 at 84 months with $0 down. Chase cut them back to 75 months at 18.59. Santander cut them back to 75 months at 19%. And I sat there for the longest 45 seconds, be like, all right, here we go. All right, it's going to, I'm bracing for impact. Okay, here we go. He's about to start yelling. About 45 seconds goes by, and the guy goes, all right, I'll do that Ally one. That's the type of technology trust bridge that you can build with customers today. And that's part of the reason that that kid that's been in the business for 2 months can go out, sell a customer, get a full meal deal in F&I and pick up $7,000 front to back. It's that when you make it easy and you make it the customer's idea, they'll say yes to it. When you put the data and transparency in front of them, they'll say yes to it. Could a sales manager send out the printouts for all of these? Sure. But there's something way more powerful when it pops up on a screen and a customer goes, I'll do that. That's the power of AutoFi's in-showroom experience is that it makes the customer take ownership of the idea, which makes them want to say yes to it. Now, here's the hard part. And it's part of why we have such an extensive install. So when we install AutoFi, and I didn't really talk a lot about us installing AutoFi when I was at the convention because I didn't want people text messaging the sign that I was pitching AutoFi, is we do a 2-week install. And the reason being is that anytime you change something at the dealership level, there's going to be this like pull back towards homeostasis. Like everyone's going to go, okay, no. And the terms that we use in retail, or that I used to use, was my dealer principal would go to the convention and then he would come back with some great idea. And all of us would be like, all right, well, just give him a couple of weeks and it'll go back to how it was. And I think the reason being is that anytime you start something new, what happens is you get this like drop. And it's a drop even in your own feelings. Like it may not even be real in performance, but you get this little period of disruption. Like you watch sales managers, like a good friend of mine, Paul Duffy, who will like keep up his like desking tool just so he can keep comparing numbers, even though they're within a couple of cents of each other on the ones that he's compared for an entire week. It's just still the safety blanket thing because there's this fear of disruption. And what you have to do is have somebody with the confidence to get you through that period of disruption. So we take a very unique stance. We go through a very intensive implementation phase in which we get all the settings and configurations done. And we agree to an in-store launch date. And we will only launch when we're in-store with your team. And the reason being is that we send in real retail people that the vast majority of which in the last 6 to 8 months were literally working car deal as a sales manager and literally working like as a GSM, who are AutoFi like experts. And they come into your dealership as change management, and they come in with a training team, and the trainers teach all your people functional literacy of how to use AutoFi to be able to like do the things that they're doing. And then change management's job is to actually work car deals with your team. If you look at the post that Mike Lutzke from Riverhead Mazda, former instructor at NADA, put on LinkedIn yesterday, Amanda, who's in here, I think is at the store right now. What he talked about was how the AutoFi team closed a whole bunch of car deals for them. They're on pace. They're a brand new Mazda point to outsell a point that's right next to them that's a well-established one, selling a bigger brand with a bigger name. And the reason being is that our team is there right now on the ground, helping ensure that everybody there is comfortable closing car deals using a digital interface. And if you do that, what happens is we can shorten that period of disruption, get your team to the other side, and then immediately start them on that growth curve towards the desired state. Where like the Mitsubishi store I referenced earlier, 80% of their car deals are going through AutoFi, and the only ones that go outside of AutoFi are the ones that they're giving away because they got to make a car deal and they're buying a rate down and they're outside of the like norm. And so there's this massive gross difference when they use AutoFi versus when they don't use AutoFi. And our job is to really shrink that down and get to the other side of it. And then the other advice that I would give you, whether you're implementing with AutoFi or any program, is you have to recognize the way that dealership people will resist you. You don't get a lot of active resistance. You don't be like, oh, I hate this, I ain't doing it. What you get is what's called passive resistance, which is like, oh yeah, cool, I'm in. And then they don't do it. And I have a word track that I like to use to inoculate passive resistance. And you'll even hear like, I have a Darren Bonanno at Wellesley Mazda. I heard him go, when one of his sales managers started saying the word track. And this is the word track of passive resistance. You ready? Oh, I love it, but insert example of one time it didn't work the way that you thought it was going to. Oh, I love it, but insert some preconceived notion of why I don't think it's going to work. And so what you'll get is this positive statement with a but followed by any reason or example why they don't think it's going to work. So if you are implementing any sort of systemic change at your dealership and you're really engaging in change management, passive resistance is the thing that you have to root out. And you have to do it just like you're handling objections. You have to get it to the surface. You have to rephrase it as a question. And then you have to like answer that question. And then the final thing I would say is you have to burn the ships. If Paul Duffy can always go back to double checking and doing things in his like penciling system, he will keep doing that even though the system is better and gets him better results. And what we found is like Amanda at Riverhead Mazda, they're the only other way to put a pencil in front of a customer is by building it in the DMS and just printing it. And so every one of their car deals are using AutoFi, and that expedites dramatically how quickly it becomes adopted. And now it's just the way they do business. And so that's my 45 minutes, 46. And so I got time for questions at the end. I appreciate you all being a part of this. I hope you found it helpful and you found it engaging, and you realize like there are real solutions to these problems out there, and they're not impossible to find. We have an unbelievable one. It's one that we spent the last 18 months, me living in a dealership and us building to actually solve these problems. And the results we're getting are, I think, even beyond the expectations that I had that we'd be able to get. So if you're interested, reach out. We would love to set you up with a demo, and then I'll open it up for questions.